Hello and welcome back to Doctrina et Veritas, quod traditio et ratio vigiant. And today is August 13th, which is the day that Hernán Cortés defeated the Aztec Empire at the siege of Tenochtitlan. This is a monumentous occasion. This was finally when the Spanish destroyed that barbaric child-sacrificing empire and instead introduced Christianity to the New World. And so in commemoration of this, I will be reading the Wikipedia article for the fall of Tenochtitlan, and you can follow along if you want. The forces under Alvarado and Olid marched first towards Chapultepec to disconnect the Aztecs from their water supply. There were springs there that supplied much of the city's water by aqueduct. The rest of the city's water was brought in by canoe. The two generals then tried to bring their forces over the causeway of Tlacopan, resulting in the Battle of Tlacopan. The Aztec forces managed to push back the Spanish and halt this assault on the capital with a determined and hard-fought land and naval counterattack. Cortés voiced more than 1,000 canoes after he launched his 13 sloops from Texcoco. Yet a favorable breeze sprang up, enabling him to overturn many canoes and kill or capture many. After winning the first battle on the lake, Cortés camped with Olid's forces. The Aztec canoe fleets worked well for attacking the Spanish because they allowed the Aztecs to surround the Spanish on both sides of the causeway. Cortés decided to make an opening in the causeway so that his brigantines could help defend his forces from both sides. He then distributed the sloops amongst his attacking forces, 4 to Alvarado, 6 for Olid, and 2 to Sandoval for the Tepeyaquila causeway. After this move, the Aztecs could no longer attack from their canoes on the opposite side of the Spanish brigantines, and the fighting went very much in our favor, according to Diab. With his brigantines, Cortés could also send forces and supplies to areas he previously could not, which put a kink in Cuauhtémoc's plan. To make it more difficult for the Spanish ships to aid the Spanish soldiers' advance along the causeways, the Aztecs dug deep pits in shallow areas of the lakes, into which they hoped the Spaniards would stumble, and fixed concealed stakes in the lake bottom to impale the launches. The Spanish horses were also ineffective on the causeways. Cortés was forced to adapt his plans again, as his initial land campaigns were ineffective. He had planned to attack on the causeways during the daytime and retreat to camp at night. However, the Aztecs moved in to occupy the abandoned bridges and barricades as soon as the Spanish forces left. Consequently, Cortés had his forces set up on causeways at night to defend their positions. Cortés also sent orders to never, on any account, leave a gap unblocked, and that all horsemen were to sleep on the causeway with their horses saddled and bridled all night long. This allowed the Spanish to progress closer and closer towards the city. The Spaniards prevented food and water from reaching the Tenochtitlan along 3 causeways. They limited supplies reaching the city from the 9 surrounding towns via canoe, by sending out 2 of their launches on nightly capture missions. However, the Aztecs were successful in setting an ambush with 30 of their piragues in an area in which they had placed impaling stakes. They captured 2 Spanish launches, killing Captains Juan de la Portilla and Pedro Barba. After capturing 2 chieftains, Cortés learned of another Aztec plot to ambush his launches with 40 piragues. Cortés then organized a counter-ambush with 6 of his launches, which was successful, killing many warriors and taking many prisoners. Afterwards, the Aztecs did not dare to lay any more ambuscades or to bring in food and water as openly as before. Lakeside towns including Iztapalapa, Churubusco, Culhuacan, and Mixquic made peace with the Spaniards. The fighting in Tenochtitlan was described by the American historian Charles Robinson as desperate, as both sides battled one another in the streets in a ferocious battle where no quarter was given nor asked for. Cuauhtémoc then attacked all 3 Spanish camps simultaneously with his entire army on the feast day of St. John. On the Tacuba causeway across Lake Texcoco, connecting Tenochtitlan to the mainland along a street now known as the Puente del Alvarado, or Alvarado's Bridge, in Mexico City, Pedro de Alvarado made a mad cavalry charge across a gap in the causeway. As Alvarado and his cavalry emerged on the other side of the gap with the infantry behind, Aztec canoes filled the gap. Pedro de Alvarado was wounded along with 8 men in his camp. Alvarado escaped from the ambush, but 5 of his men were captured and taken off to the Great Temple to be sacrificed. Much to their horror, the Spanish from their positions could see the captured comrades being sacrificed on the Great Pyramid. which increased their hatred of the Aztecs. At the end of each day, the Spanish gave a prayer, "Oh, thanks be to God that they did not carry me off today to be sacrificed." Cortés then decided to push forward a simultaneous attack toward the Mexican market square, resulting in what is now known as the Battle of Colhuacatonco. However, he neglected to fill in a channel as he advanced, and when the Aztec counterattacked, Cortés was wounded and almost captured. Cristobal de Olé and Cristobal de Guzman gave their lives for Cortés, and 65 Spanish soldiers were captured alive. Cuauhtémoc then had 5 of their heads thrown at Alvarado's camp, 4 thrown at Cortés' camp, 6 thrown at Sandoval's camp, while 10 more were sacrificed to Huitzilopochtli and Texcatlipoca idols. Diaz relates, "The dismal drum of Huichilobos sounded again. We saw our comrades who had been captured in Cortés' defeat being dragged up the steps to be sacrificed. Cutting open their chests, drew out their palpitating hearts which they offered to the idols. The Indian butchers cut off their arms and legs. Then they ate their flesh with a sauce of peppers and tomatoes, throwing their trunks and entrails to the lions and tigers and serpents and snakes. Cuauhtémoc then sent the hands and feet of our soldiers and the skin of their faces to all the towns of our allies. The Aztecs sacrificed a batch of Spanish prisoners each night for 10 nights. The Aztecs cast off the cooked limbs of their prisoners to the Tlaxcalans, shouting, 'Eat the flesh of these tueles,' or gods, a reference to the early belief that the Spanish were gods, and of your brothers because we are sated with it." The Aztecs continued to attack the Spaniards on the causeways day and night. Spanish allies in the cities surrounding the lake lost many lives or went home wounded, and half their canoes were destroyed. Yet they did not help the Aztecs anymore, for they loathed them. Yet of the 24,000 allies, only 200 remained in the 3 Spanish camps, the rest deciding to return home. Ahuashpitzin, later baptized as Don Carlos, the brother of Texcoco Lord Don Fernando, remained in Cortés' camp with 40 relatives and friends. The Cinco Cacique remained in Sandoval's camp with 50 men. Alvarado's camp had Chichimecatecle, 2 of Lorenzo de Vargas, and 80 Tlaxcalans. To maintain the advance, Cortés razed every neighborhood he captured, using the rubble to fill up canals and gaps in the causeways to allow his infantry and cavalry to advance in formation, a fighting tactic that favored the Spanish instead of engaging in hand-to-hand street fighting, which favored the Aztecs. Cortés then concentrated on letting the Aztecs eat up all the provisions they had and drink brackish water. The Spaniards gradually advanced along the causeways, though without allies. Their launches had freedom at the lake after devising a method for breaking the impaling stakes the Aztecs had placed for them. After 12 days of this, the Spanish allies realized the prophecy by the Aztec idols that the Spaniards would be dead in 10 days was false. 2,000 warriors returned from Texcoco, as did many Tlaxcalan warriors in the Tapaneca from Tabayanco, and those from Xochitzingo from Cholula. Cuauhtémoc then enlisted his allies in Matlazingo, Malinalco, and Tulapa, in attacking the Spaniards from their rear. However, Cortés sent Andrés de Tapia with 20 horsemen and 100 soldiers, and Gonzalo de Sandoval with 20 horsemen and 80 soldiers to help his allies attack this new threat. They returned with 2 of the Matlazingo chieftains as prisoners. As the Spanish employed more successful strategies, their stranglehold on Tenochtitlan tightened, and famine began to affect the Aztecs. The Aztecs were cut off from the mainland because of the occupied causeways. Cortés also had the advantage of fighting a mostly defensive battle. Though Cuauhtémoc organized a large-scale attack on Alvarado's forces at Tlacopan, the Aztec forces were pushed back. Throughout the siege, the Aztecs had little aid from outside of Tenochtitlan. The remaining loyal tributaries had difficulty sending forces, because it would leave them vulnerable to Spanish attack. Many of these loyal tributaries were surrounded by the Spanish. Though the tributaries often went back and forth in their loyalties at any sign of change, the Spanish tried hard not to lose any allies. They feared a snowball effect. If one tributary left, others might follow. Therefore, they brutally crushed any tributaries who tried to send help to Tenochtitlan. Any shipments of food and water were intercepted, and even those trying to fish in the lake were attacked. The situation inside the city was desperate. Because of the famine and smallpox, there were already thousands of victims. Women offered to the gods even their children's clothes, so most children were stark naked. Many Aztecs drank dirty, brackish water because of their severe thirst and contracted dysentery. The famine was so severe that the Aztecs ate anything, even wood, leather, and bricks, for sustenance. The Spanish continued to push closer to Tenochtitlan. The Aztecs changed tactics as often as the Spanish did, preventing Cortés' forces from being entirely victorious. However, the Aztecs were severely worn down. They had no new troops, supplies, food, or water. Spanish received a large amount of supplies from Veracruz, and somewhat renewed, they finally entered the main part of Tenochtitlan. Cortés then ordered a simultaneous advance of all three camps toward Tlatelolco marketplace. Alvarado's company made it there first, and Gutierrez de Badajoz advanced to the top of Huichipotlicicu, setting it afire and placing the Spanish banners. Cortés and Sandoval's men were able to join them there after 4 more days of fighting. The Spanish forces and their allies advanced into the city. Despite inflicting heavy casualties, the Aztecs could not halt the Spanish advance. While fighting against the city raged, the Aztecs cut out and ate the hearts of 70 Spanish prisoners of war at the altar of Huichipochtli. By August, many of the native inhabitants had fled to Tlatelolco. Cortés sent emissaries to negotiate with the Tlatelolcas to join his side, but the Tlatelolcas remained loyal to the Aztecs. Throughout the siege, the Tlaxcalans waged a merciless campaign against the Aztecs, who had long oppressed them for 100 years. The Tlaxcalans had been forced to hand them an annual quota of young men and women to be sacrificed and eaten at the Great Pyramid of Tenochtitlan, and now the Tlaxcalans saw their chance for revenge. The American historian Charles Robinson wrote, "Centuries of hate and the basic viciousness of Mesoamerican warfare combined in violence that appalled Cortés himself." In a letter to Holy Roman Emperor Charles V, Cortés wrote, "We had more trouble in preventing our allies from killing with such cruelty than we had fighting the enemy. For no race, however savage, has ever practiced such fierce and unnatural cruelty as the natives of these parts. Our allies also took many spoils that day, which we were unable to prevent, as they numbered more than 150,000, and we Spaniards only some 900. Neither our precautions nor our warnings could stop their looting. Though we did all we could, I had posted Spaniards in every street so that when the people began to come out to surrender, they might prevent our allies from killing those wretched people whose numbers were uncountable. I also told the captains of our allies that on no account should any of those people be slain, but there were so many that we could not prevent more than 15,000 being killed and sacrificed by the Tlaxcalans that day." Throughout the battles with the Spanish, the Aztecs still practiced their traditional ceremonies and customs. Tlatlapacatl was chosen to be outfitted to wear the Quetzal owl costume. He was supplied with darts sacred to Huitzilopochtli, which came with wooden tips and flint tops. When he came, the Spanish soldiers appeared scared and intimidated. They chased the owl warrior, but he was neither captured nor killed. The Aztecs took this as a good sign, but they could fight no more, and after discussions with the nobles, Cuauhtemoc began talks with the Spanish. At some point in the final days of the battle, a tornado struck the basin over Tlatelolco and then moved out over the lake. This was the first tornado seen by Europeans in the Americas. After several failed overtures to Cuauhtemoc, Cortés ordered Sandoval to attack that part of the city which Cuauhtemoc had retreated. As hundreds of canoes had filled the lake fleeing the doomed city, Cortés sent his brigantines out to intercept them. Cuauhtemoc attempted to flee with his property, gold, jewels, and family in 50 piragues, but was soon captured by Sandoval's launches and brought before Cortés. The Aztec forces were destroyed and the Aztecs surrendered on August 13, 1521, which is today. Julian date. Cortés demanded that the return of gold lost during La Noche Triste. Under torture, by burning their feet with oil, Cuauhtemoc and the Lord Tacuba confessed to dumping his gold and jewels into the lake. Yet little gold remained, as earlier a fifth had been sent to Spain and another kept by Cortés. In the end, the remaining gold all fell into the king's officials. Cuauhtemoc was taken prisoner the same day as related above and remained the titular leader of Tenochtitlan under the control of Cortés, until he was hanged for treason in 1525 while accompanying a Spanish expedition to Guatemala. 100,000 to 240,000 were killed in the campaign overall, including warriors and civilians. As many as 40,000 Aztec bodies were floating in the canals or awaiting burial after the siege. Almost all of the Aztec nobility were dead, and the remaining survivors were mostly young women and very young children. At least 40,000 Aztec civilians were killed and captured. After the fall of Tenochtitlan, the remaining Aztec warriors and civilians fled the city as the Spanish allies, primarily the Tlaxcalans, continued to attack even after the surrender, slaughtering thousands of the remaining civilians and looting the city. The Tlaxcalans did not spare women or children. They entered houses stealing all precious things they found, raping and then killing women, stabbing children. The survivors marched out of the city for the next 3 days. One source claims that 6,000 were massacred in the town of Iztapalapa alone. Due to the wholesale slaughter after the campaign and the destruction of the Aztec culture, some sources such as Israel Carney, John C. Cox, Norman Neymark have likened the siege to a genocide. Although some reports put the number as low as 40, the Spanish lost over 100 soldiers in the siege, while thousands of Tlaxcalans perished. It is estimated that around 1,800 Spaniards died from all causes during the 2-year campaign. from Veracruz to Tenochtitlan. The remaining Spanish forces consisted of 900 Spaniards, 80 horses, 16 pieces of artillery, and Cortés' 13 brigantines. Other sources estimate that around 860 Spanish soldiers and 20,000 Tlaxcalan warriors were killed during all the battles in this region from 1519 to 1521. It is well accepted that Cortés' indigenous allies, which may have numbered as many as 200,000 over the 3-year period of conquest, were indispensable to his success.